Hello again, I am Blunty, and this is an Android phone called the ZOPO C3. Probably not a brand you're as familiar with as Sony or Samsung, for instance, when it comes to Android hardware, but as I've been discovering, this little bugger packs a hell of a punch for a significantly lower price than the big boys ask for. Now, I had this ZOPO C3 sent in for review from the gang at coollycool.com, which I love that website name, Coollycool. And the C3's basic vital statistics read thusly. It's got a quad-core 1.5 GHz Cortex-A7 CPU, a 5-inch Full HD 1080p screen, a 13-megapixel camera on the back and a 5-megapixel shooter on the front, a gigabyte of RAM and 16 gigs of onboard storage, which can be expanded thanks to the fact it's got a micro SD card slot in it. It's also got dual SIM slots. And the whole lot of it is humming along under Android 4.2, also known as Jelly Bean. And it packs all of this in a phone that's just 8.5mm thick, or 8.5mm thin, depending on what side of the fence you're sitting on. And coollycool.com asked just $340 for it. That's it. Certainly a much lower price than the specs would suggest. Now, to be honest with you, I had reasonably low expectations for the C3. I mean, I've owned and played with many similarly surprisingly inexpensive Android devices right out of China, and while some of them have been fairly good, none of them have even come close to blowing me away with their spectacular quality. But the instant I turned on the C3, I started to suspect that the streak of moderately satisfying mediocrity was about to give way to something much more satisfying. The screen, as I mentioned, is a 1920 by 1080 Full HD 1080p display. It is beautiful, it's crisp and colourful, and it's got great contrast. The only area where this big 5-inch Android animal gives away its budget-friendly tag is in the brightness. At max setting, it's not quite as bright as those from the big boys, but in saying that, I have to be clear. I never once found the brightness to be insufficient. It's just not quite as bright as the Sony Xperia Zs of the world. Indoors or outdoors, even under direct sunlight, it remained easily readable and colours remained vibrant. That was surprise number one. The general Android experience is very good too. Every now and again there's a slight lag or stutter or momentary pause, but for the largest part it's a very smooth experience. And that Jelly Bean Android experience is relatively pure too. It's not quite unadulterated stock Android, but it's quite close to it. And the ZOPO specific changes are very lightweight stuff. Mostly it's just a few pre-installed apps and bits and pieces. Nothing shocking, nothing nasty, and nothing that gets in the way, which is the important thing. And all the important stuff is pure. All the Google services work, and the Google Play Store is in there, which is not always the case on these Chinese droids, I'm afraid to say. The phone is thin and light and has a nice feel to the build quality. It doesn't feel cheap and nasty, and there's no squeaks or creaks from poorly fitted panels and the like. It snaps together really subtly and, feels really confident in hand. The onboard sound is a little on the tinny side, but the volume and clarity are good. And when it comes to grunt, most people won't find it lacking. Rendering heavy web pages works well, editing photos is snappy enough, and it'll cope with 3D gaming without much of a battle either. Now, the GPU isn't as beefy as what you'll find in the flagship 5 inches from, say, Sony, so a few of the heavier games out there may run with fewer complex textures, but they do run just fine and keep smooth, and the gameplay experience is, well, look at it. I mean, who can complain? It runs smooth, it's responsive, it's a wonderful experience. I like it. What's to complain about? So far it's a pretty damn fine Android phone, wouldn't you say? Surprisingly great, in fact. And then we come to the camera. Now, this is usually the Achilles heel of cheap Android phones. Hell, even some of the expensive ones have frustratingly crapola cameras on board. But check this out. Quite honestly, I was gobsmacked. Not only are the images this thing sucks in leagues above what I was expecting, but they're some of the nicest I've seen come out of most Android phones. Now, admittedly, it's not the best lens I've ever come across in a phone. It tends to leave fine details a bit on the soft side. But let's be fair, considering the fact that the shots we usually use our phones for are very rarely printed out on big poster-sized boards, but instead looked at on other phones and tablets and laptop screens, all of significantly lower resolution than the 13 megapixels the C3 camera saves anyway, a bit of softness in the fine details is not really a practical issue for 99.99% of people out there. Hell, at the size most people look at these images, they'll never even notice in the first place. The dynamic range is also a bit more limited than I usually like, so the highlights in high contrast situations tend to get a bit lost or blown out completely sometimes. But as long as you're careful about that, all of the other things like colour, saturation and contrast and the tonal qualities are all very pleasant indeed. Even in low light, another traditional weak spot for smartphone cameras, it holds itself together amazingly well. It can even do macro shots with surprising capacity. Again, the lens holds back the detail resolving power a bit, but again, for most people that's not even going to be an issue at all. Video looks pretty decent too, although the default HD video option caps off at just 15 frames per second, which can lead to movement looking a bit jerky. Oddly though, and paradoxically, the next step down in the recording quality list keeps you at 1080p but ups the frame rate to a much more modern and traditional 30 frames per second. So, that strange quirk aside, the video is quite usable. Certainly good enough for sucking in those unexpected moments and throwing some clean moving images up on Vine and the like. And again, like with stills, even in low light or indoors, it's a stronger performer than you may expect. Certainly better than I'd counted on. The front camera, well, it'll work for Google Hangouts and the like, but frankly, its quality falls much more in line with what I'd expect. It's serviceable, sure, but, not impressive. So, the ZOPO C3, it's a hell of a contender and a very pleasant surprise indeed. The only real weak spot is the battery. It's not awful, but if you like to keep things like the GPS constantly on and the Wi-Fi active for push updates when the screen is off and it's in your pockets and the like, then you'll notice the hit. Moderate to heavy users will want to invest in a spare battery. Luckily though, when I checked, I found out that spare batteries for this thing only cost like $12, so go nuts and get 3. So, if you want a 5-inch 1080p power pack and game playing shutterbug and jelly bean toting Android beastie, then I think you'd be silly not to at least consider the ZOPO C3. Sure, it's got a funny name that you probably never heard of, but it will save you at least a few $100 comparatively speaking. So gang, welcome to the new world where Chinese Android phones actually kick a bit of ass. Who knew? Who's prepared for that? Not me. And of course, if you want to check out more of the nitty-gritty specs and details and stuff, there is a link in the description, which will take you to the coolico.com site. Again, I love that name. Anyway, thanks for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time.